Hilton brings you new ways to stay. With experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
That's what I was looking for. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think we've done everything. Okay. I'm just going to go through this. I don't have any set time for an interview. I kind of organically like to have it go as long as it goes. So whatever time it is fine. I will also try and get this out this week, and I'll send you links to this when it comes out and share the information on social media and everything like that.
Very cool.
All right. I'm just going to do a countdown and then go into the questions. Let me just double check everything. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the podcast. Today I'm speaking with Dan Abel Jr. from Bissengers Chocolate. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, to kick things off for our listeners, could you share where you're joining us from today?
Yep, here in St. Louis, Missouri.
Very well, thank you. Now, Bissengers is a name with some serious history. For those who might be new to the brand, could you paint a picture of what Bissengers is all about and its incredible journey as a chief chocolate officer that you have?
Absolutely. So Bissengers actually got its start in the mid-1600s. And although we don't know the exact day they started handcrafting their confections, we know that in 1668, so well over 350 years ago, they were appointed the Confesseur Imperial, which translates in English to confectioner to the empire, by King Louis XIV in Paris, France. And they really kind of maintained their status as the royal chocolatier to the palace for well over 150 years until they moved the company to the United States in 1845, where they opened up their first United States retail chocolate shop in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then in 1927, they moved the company to St. Louis, Missouri, where we're nearly 100 years later in the exact same place that they started.
What's some considerable history? Looking back at Bissinger's history, especially you had an 1899 cookbook. What aspects really resonate with you or present unique challenges in today's chocolate market?
It's a good question. One of the things with Bissingers, we believe it's the oldest chocolatier in the world. We haven't been able to, find anyone that's older. We also haven't been able to, do extensive research, just kind of going from our own research and being in the chocolate industry for, over the years. But the concept of what Bissinger's brand was in 1845, for example, is very similar to what Bissinger's is today. So the customer base is the same, the marketing's the same, and we don't really believe we do a lot of marketing. We believe we do a lot of storytelling because the brand has such a rich story that's important to convey that message, and then everything else kind of falls into place. But over the years, we've gone up, from as recently as the cocoa crisis that we're in to the COVID pandemic to we have certificates from the early 1900s where there was sugar rationing and there was allocations during the war. So World War II or World War I, how, certain materials were rationed. And so Bissinger's was, allocated only 2,000 pounds of sugar every few weeks because of sugar rationing. So, Bissinger's over its 350-year history has endured literally everything there is. And it's survived every single one of those moments.
It's so fascinating. the history and how Bissengers has transitioned from its European roots to becoming a St. Louis staple. How do you see the European heritage shaping the brand's identity and the chocolate you create here in America today?
So, and a lot of what we still do here in our St. Louis Candy Kitchen has a lot of European influence. So we're purchasing still a lot of ingredients out of Europe. A lot of our transactions are done in euros, but some of the chocolate or all of the milk and dark chocolates actually still produced in Europe and then brought over. But a lot of the candied fruits are coming from Europe. Some of the foils that we use to hand wrap our confections are coming from Europe. So I really try to keep as much as I can coming from Europe because it truly just matches the authenticity of the brand. And at the end of the day, Bissinger's 350 years of existence, half of that was over in France. And as we create new collections, we always try to come up with flavor profiles that, half of it's for France and half of it's for the United States. For example, we launched this new craft cocktail collection and it's 8 cocktail truffles. And
Ooh,
oh, it's so good. Yeah, I know, right? And so
that sounds great.
there was a lot of research and development, a lot of work and trial and error that went into selecting those 8. But with the team, we came up with 4 popular European cocktail flavors and 4 popular domestic ones. And so, a domestic one would be like the Manhattan truffle or a old fashioned or espresso martini. But over in Europe, it's, Kir Royale, Sidecar, or French 75. And our customer base really got excited because they get to taste that European influence, but then that American influence all in one collection. And so that's really fun for us.
That sounds amazing. I really want to try that. Speaking about that, it's like I know, like for instance, growing up, I remember that a lot of people would buy chocolate from a lot of monoliths, but I think in the last 10 years or more, a lot of people are like they're like willing to buy something that's better, and they're spending a little bit more money to buy something better because they're just not. For me, choice wise, I'll go without chocolate if I can't get the good stuff. And I think I know a lot of people who are like that. They'd rather get something better than just buy anything. How do you keep
Yeah, agreed.
keep up with that, with the today's kind of trends and everything, by also honoring the past at the same time?
We work in a 12 to 18 month cycle, for example. And because of that, sometimes we always typically miss fads. We like to stay on trends, but we always miss fads, and that's kind of by design because Bissingers is, with such a rich legacy, we want to make sure that we're creating something that will have a lasting impact. There's a few times where we want to do limited edition releases that are fun and it sparks a lot of interest, but a lot of times a limited edition release is part of our Vault series, for example, which is a really old recipe that comes out of the 1899 recipe book that we just launched it for a 2 to 3 week cycle and then put it back into the vault. But if we create something that's new on the latest trend, for example, usually the base ingredient or the base recipe came from the Bissingers cookbook, and then we do our own modifications or versions to it. So, everything at Bissingers is handmade, and so there's a level of, in some cases with a limited edition small batch, we could whip it up pretty quickly because we don't have to set up machine time or buy new molds or a lot of customizations that go into what the mass produced brands have to do. We can just go come up with our decoration and design and flavor and recipe and go craft that. But other times we want to make sure that it's something that our core legacy customer base would appreciate.
Well, speaking about I like the idea, and I think it's really cool that you guys do small batches and you do fresh ingredients. You're not creating something mass produced to last on a supermarket shelf for 10 years. And is that something that you guys have always been cognizant about, the difference between the different, chocolate brands? Is you're doing something that's fresh, kind of out now, and it's made to be enjoyed now?
Absolutely. And we've kind of tested things over the years, and there was a time, it was about 8 or 9 years ago, where we were starting to get into some higher volume runs, and it was a good life lesson for us because with our team the way our factory is set up, we truly built this for small batch operations. So as we had these opportunities to jump into some much, much larger retailers and much, much larger opportunities. We realized that like the faster you make a product, the more you start to compromise some sort of quality. And we really didn't like what the end result was. So we quickly walked away from that and doubled down on the small batch side of things. And really it's been the best and most, best situation ever. And I think that there's always that grass is always greener mentality. So the fact that we got to kind of dip our toe in the water of the high volume production nearly a decade ago was good to kind of get that out of our system in a way. And so now we can truly go back to crafting every single piece with the hand stripe and hand decoration on top, and hand packing those gift boxes, and doing all of the ribbons and bows and everything, the accoutrement that goes into crafting a Bissinger's confection.
I want to talk again circle back to the 1899 cookbook. Now, it must hold some treasures and must be really fun to work with. Are there any recipes or techniques from that are tricky and using in the modern time? And
Yes.
are there anything in there that makes them? Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and like the best example that I can come up with is that the original marshmallow recipe, there was not commercial gelatin back in the day. So we now use commercial gelatin to make our marshmallow.
Right.
But the 1800s recipe where you actually take bones and boil it to make a recipe, a gelatin broth. And so some of those things we've retired.
Yeah.
So we've got to a little bit of updates. But that was the way. The great thing about the recipes is they're so pure. Some things only take 5 or 6 ingredients, and on paper it's like, oh, that must be easy, but it's not, because of it's preservative free. There's so much in the technique. A lot of our ingredients, we actually make the ingredient that goes into another. So there's a list of sub ingredients. All of the fruit flavors, for example, we make those in-house. And so we start with different, real fruits, and then those ingredients, and we kind of build this marmalade jelly type, what it looks like on surface. And then that goes and blends that into the truffle center or caramel center or cream center. So if you take a raspberry cream, for example, we make the fondant, we make the raspberry flavor, then we cook those two together. Then we form it and shape it in a way called starch casting, which is an old 1800s technique. And then the final thing is dipping it in chocolate. So, you think of a raspberry cream, simple product in the assortment. The fastest we can make that product is in 4 days. Sometimes it takes longer. So it's such a long and tedious process, but there's no other raspberry cream in the world like a Bissinger's raspberry cream. And so for us to change one thing, we would have to change everything. So we just always kept it the exact same way.
Speaking to this, I mean, as chief chocolate officer, the term handcrafted probably carries a lot of weight at Bissinger's. What does this truly mean today in 2005? I know that, for a lot of people, having something handcrafted is almost impossible to find or get. And it's exciting, I think, when you can. I, for instance, love when I can find things that are handcrafted and made, not in a big company with all kinds of preservatives, but something that's made fresh and new. Can you talk a little bit about, what the handcrafted name means in today's market?
Absolutely. So if you take any one of our products, in often cases, it probably goes through 20 to 25 people before it gets completed. So the journey of a caramel, for example, which is, typically caramels and truffles, those two categories are our biggest production categories. And so a caramel is going to start with really premium ingredients, heavy whipping cream, cane sugar, Madagascar, vanilla, and those are blended together in antique copper kettles where we have at least 2, sometimes 3 candy makers that are mixing those ingredients and under an open flame in a big copper kettle. After a couple hours of cooking, then that caramel is poured onto a table. Each table is about 3 foot by 7 feet, so it holds about 3,000 pieces of caramel, which is a trivia question on our factory tours if you ever needed to have a couple answers ready for you. So it's about a little bit over 3,000 caramels on a table. So that when they pour that, we have a team then that is actually running the caramel squares through cutting machines, which actually cuts it into those squares. And so that's another team right there. Then there's the chocolate dipping. So they take those caramels, they feed it onto the production line. The first thing we do is we dip the bottom. So it goes through its first pass of chocolate where the bottom of the caramel is dipped, and then it fully enrobes it in chocolate, which is that iconic waterfall of chocolate that the confection passes through. At that stage, it's still in liquid form. It's still, the chocolate's still wet rather, and it's about to go into the cooling tunnel. So there's about a 6-foot section between the two, and we hand decorate every single piece. So it depends on the confection. We either with a glove on tap the confection and make a drawing on the top, which is called a stripe, or we do something called a drizzle, where we may take white chocolate and drizzle it on top of the confection, or dark chocolate on milk, vice versa, to make its unique design. Or we sprinkles, Mediterranean sea salt, or, and some of our truffles have a mint topping or a, different. So all of those come together. And then at that point, we finally have made just one of the confections, in this case, the caramel we're talking about. So then we have to take it to our packing department, where it goes on one of 4 packing lanes to be hand packed into a box chocolate. And then at that point, it's closing the box, it's shrink wrapping the box, it's case packing it. So it just goes through teams upon teams upon teams. At the entire process, there's no automation at all. Everything goes through its process. And because of that, as every time we have a team member either feeding the caramel on the line or decorating it or packing it, we've got one set of eyes that is looking at the quality control of it. So, are they artisans, or is it 25 quality control, people? It's kind of both. And so the handmade atmosphere that we have here not only ensures that the product looks delicious and tastes delicious, but makes sure that every single confection, by the time it gets to the customer, has gone through dozens upon dozens of eyes to actually, look at the product and make sure it is to our quality standard.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre al app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
It's an interesting time for chocolate right now. What are some of the biggest hurdles and exciting opportunities you're seeing in this time for premium chocolate brands?
I think there's a few shifts going on. There's consolidation for sure. It's a tough industry, and if we've seen with the bakery industry and the florist industry, a lot of those industries have really, all the independents are starting to go away and merge into larger ones. So that's been changing on a macro level for a while. It's an older industry, so a lot of ownership is starting to retire, and the new generation is not wanting to get into it. My family is the exception. My brother, sister, and I are all in the second generation, and we've wanted to get into our family's business, and we absolutely, love every day of it. But there's just not a lot of people our age that, we're in our 30s and 40s, and the median age of ownership of the chocolate industry is probably closer to 60. So we always still feel like we're the really young people in industry. But the other thing is we're in this cocoa crisis, and it's fueled by a few things. Number one is with the cocoa crisis, as the cost of the cocoa bean itself in the last 18 months has tripled. And we've never seen it go that high in the history of the commodity, number one, but usually we've never seen it go above 10 to 15% of its lowest level. So it's, middle of 2023, it was probably at about $2,600 a metric ton. And by end of 2024, it got to about 11,700. It's stabilized around 9,000, and I think today it's in the eights, mid 8,000.
Yeah,
but it never broke 4 ever, and so we're all learning very quickly on how to handle this extreme price change. And I mean, every delivery is costing us $20,000 to $40,000 more of delivery of chocolate right now. I mean, it's not a little thing. It's not a couple pennies. It is tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases every other week.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. And, there's no magical way to, I'll take it one step back. There's a lot of things companies are doing to bring pricing in check by using less expensive packaging, using less expensive other ingredients, doing, automating more. That's not what Bissengers is going to do. So we
Right.
will not go and cheapen the packaging or cheapen the vanilla that we use or the sugar. And so because of that, the cost of manufacture a Bissengers box of chocolates is going way up. And we're having to manage that as best we can.
Now, we talked earlier about the classic cocktails, truffles. What are some of the flavors? You have lots of classic flavors that you've used throughout the years, but what are some of the flavors and products you're really excited about right now?
We launched a new collection last year called 1668, and it truly was to pay respect to the day that the first year that Bissingers started or became famous, rather, was 1668 in Paris, France. And that was a really special assortment because the packaging was different. We actually closed every single box with a hand stamped wax seal. They were all molded, so we have molding lines and robing lines. These were all molded soft center confections, and we really pulled, every piece was designed, so from our soft caramel to the raspberry caramel, the Grand Marnier truffle, for example. First of all, it's a French liqueur, but there was this hidden kind of off the record thing that happened in the 70s at a Bissinger shop. They would make these Grand Marnier truffles, and you had to kind of know somebody that worked there to get them. So they weren't something that was on the shelf. They were always stored in the back. And there was this reputation that created around these Grand Marnier truffles. It was almost like you go in and whisper and say, "Hey, do you have the stuff? Do you have them today?" And so we've heard so many of those stories, and I've had these customers tell me, they're like, "Oh, once I heard about those Grand Marnier truffles, and so like that piece we recreated for the 1668 collection because it had such a legacy story, and that was so much fun to create. But for example, I have talked to a lot of friends and people that have consumed this box, and almost, like, I would say 8 out of 10 of them, when I ask them what's your favorite piece, they tell me the cinnamon pear caramel.
Ooh.
And I thought it was delicious when we created it, but I just was blown away that was the one that stood out among all of the rest of them. So I still to this day get very surprised with feedback. And now I'm biased because I was the one that created that particular flavor, but I'm also so surprised that was the winner out of these great 9 confections. So it's still every day a new adventure here.
Running a chocolate company with such a rich and long history must have some surprises. What's one unexpected thing you learned or experienced in your role?
We have 2 chocolate companies, and our primary company, Chocolate, there's so much excitement about new innovation. And so we really move quick with that. And if something has to go away, if we come out with 2 or 3 products and we have to retire one of them to make space, people seem to understand that, and because they're ready for the next new confection. In Bissingers, it's a little different, and there's so much new product development happening. So sometimes we're forced to retire an old product, but we usually get so much feedback because these confections have been a part of people's lives for not days or years, but decades. And sometimes we look at something and say, well, we only sold 100 boxes, at this holiday season, it's time to go. Usually I hear from 25 of those 100 people who tell me, why did you get rid of it? It was my favorite thing. And, we just encourage them to look at some of the new creations that's coming out of Bissingers, and they do, but there's this, it's almost like a personal attack that we got rid of their favorite product. And at first it was such a strange thing to me, but now I truly understand it, that the brand is so important to our customers, and the brand is so personal to them. It's not my Bissingers, it's their Bissingers, and I'm just the current custodian of it. And we absolutely love that. So we really keep that in mind. as we work on new flavors, new products, and new creations.
To any of our listeners who've not tasted Bissengers before, what's one product you'd recommend that they try to really get the brand?
If you like fruit, I think our glacade candied fruit, candied oranges, for example, are half dipped in Bissinger's dark chocolate. The fruit itself comes from Europe. It's glazed in a very proprietary way, special recipe just for Bissingers. I think that sums up Bissingers in a nutshell. It's just this incredibly unique confection. It looks so simple, but it just has layers of flavor. But then the other side of it, I would say that the classic Carl Bissinger collection, which is our most popular assorted box of chocolates, will be the other direction I go because it truly shows the entire brand in a nutshell. French fondant creams, caramels from a recipe that goes back 300 years, European style truffles, and it kind of just brings all those pieces together.
Beyond just growing your brand and getting people to know about Bissingers, have there been any recent hurdles in the past few years? COVID would come to mind that have made operating a chocolate company difficult.
Yeah, I mean we've certainly had a lot of supply chain issues over the last few years. There's a lot of education that came from that because as we've had layers upon layers of supply chain issues, mostly due to COVID. Also with labor issues, whether it's at the supplier's facility or ours, that we've had to learn to really widen our base. And so, for example, our gift boxes, in our chocolate bar box is something we use a lot of volume of. We had to name secondary suppliers to make those. And with that comes tens of thousands of dollars of tooling fees, one-time plate charges and foil stamping fees. And we had to invest into that so we can have the ability to have those boxes made at more than one facility. We've also done that with our chocolate, where we have 2 European suppliers that can actually create the recipe. And it's hard to do. Sometimes those take 6 to 8 months of R&D and development, even though if we give them the recipe and the bean sourcing and everything, they just don't always get it right the first time. So it's forced us to, as we're trying to build a business and make the finest quality product out there, it's forced us to have to take a step back in some cases and work with our supply chain and find new suppliers for the redundancy of the business. And that has been expensive. It's been very very tedious process, but I'm confident that all of those decisions we made have made Bissingers much stronger now because it allows us to hurdle, more problems in the future that could come up.
Dan, I got to ask you one last question. Do you ever feel like Willy Wonka?
Almost every day.
Must be wonderful.
I never, when the business was really small, I was the candy maker with our head candy maker. I was the retail manager at one time. I was I have held all the positions. I've run production lines. And so as I've done everything, and I still work, with our teams and our directors and our managers for continuous improvement. But now my job on a macro level is to kind of oversee all of the departments. So I get to keep my hands in. I talked to, we're halfway through Monday, and I've already met with our engineering team, our quality team, our operations team, our candy makers, and I've talked to 2 of our retail stores. So I literally touch the entire business every day, and I could not do it any other way. If I get trapped on one side of the building, on some busy days, I feel like I'm just missing out the other side.
Yeah.
So it's for some people, they'd probably go crazy. My controlled chaos Willy Wonka experiment is, it very much works to my personality, but it allows me to be all over the place at any given time.
I love that. Dan, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. We're going to have links in the bio that talk about Bissingers and where you can get their product. Dan, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we're going to end there. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
I hope I get to come out and have a tour sometime. That sounds really wonderful.
Oh, please do. We're actually very active